You are the power of this cosmos. You are pure intelligence. You are unspeakable beauty. You are in perfect harmony with the entire cosmos. Stars and unknown stars, sun and moon, air and light, the beautiful plant kingdom of Mother Nature, the waters. This is your context. Male-female collaboration in same-sex or opposite-sex intimacy, that power is yours. And you're allowed to have that.
So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Heart of Yoga podcast. And this week we are very glad and happy to have a special guest beaming in from Croatia, a yoga master of Croatia, Domagoj Orlić. And he's the author of numerous books in Croatian and English, including some upcoming in English with Silver Snake Press. And he's a dear friend of Mark's, and I'm happy to call him a friend as well. And he is doing brilliant work teaching in Croatia and preserving the beautiful traditional method of passing on yoga from teacher to student in sincere relationship. And I'm very happy to say that we can connect through this technology across many oceans and sit in the same room together, as it were. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
On the same Mother Earth, as it were, as it is.
Exactly, in the one big room.
Yeah.
I like the way you emphasize we are glad and we are happy.
Yeah.
And I feel that, right? I'm so happy to see you, Domagoj. And glad, it's like the gladness is like a brightness and an outshining, you know, of everything. To meet you, my heart is gladdened. You know, to see,
so much.
Just to see you again. The celebration of that brightness and the happiness of this meeting that we've enjoyed now for a long time. I can't remember how long, but a lot of years have gone by.
20 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I want to start our conversation by a memory that I had of you in Zagreb, and I went there and I taught with you. And at the end of the visit, as I left, you said to me in a quiet, very personal way, you said, Mark, there's two Heart of Yoga teachers in this world. And that always has stuck with me. What I've noticed about you is in your scholarship and in your sincerity and in your personal investigation and practice of this vast subject of yoga with a vast ancient history to it, and you've tested things out for yourself, and you have made a stand for this that we call the Heart of Yoga from Krishnamurti and his son Desikachar. You've made a stand in the authority of your own experience, not as like a sycophantic fan of me, you know, trying to duplicate what I teach, but you've stood in your own life and tested it out for yourself in your own practice, and now you speak with the authority of your own experience. So I just want to acknowledge you for that, and acknowledge you as a yoga teacher, capital Y, capital T. You know, you teach yoga as you have experienced it yourself, that famous line from Krishnamurti, and you've learned how to adapt it to individual needs of all the people that come to you. So that's my starting point, and I invite you now to speak of that time before we met in person, when you had a sincere interest in yoga, and you're looking around, looking, and then somehow, I don't remember exactly, we met and you read some of my material and so forth, and we began to correspond. Could you talk of that time of transition from not knowing anything about this and then getting the information and what it did for you?
Yes, of course. I first heard about yoga when I was only 9 years old or so. And I tried to practice it when I was a young gymnast, when I was maybe, I don't know, 13 years old or so, because I wanted to improve my flexibility. Somebody suggested it. And once I started practicing yoga, from a book, I noticed that there is a deep philosophical or religious component in it. And I started to explore that because my father was a philosophy teacher, and I had some interest in philosophy from early age. And so I discovered that there is so much more to yoga than just, physical exercises. And I started reading books and, trying to find the right kind of information that was practical. And I was doing that for almost 10 years, but did more harm than good by practicing yoga in this way. It was just experimenting, no teacher, just reading books and trying to make something out of it. And my body revolted, because I was trying to impose a form on the body that body was not ready to accept. And so I was struggling with discipline. I was practicing on and off. And when I was practicing, it was mostly gymnastics, or predominantly gymnastics, or only gymnastics. And I was thinking that it was yoga, but I felt something was wrong. And so I kept researching. And in 1997, I bought the book, The Heart of Yoga, Developing a Personal Practice. The first edition, with Mark's introduction there, still there. It was removed in the revised edition. So most people don't even know that Mark wrote an introduction for that book. And in that introduction, Mark, in very simple terms, explained what yoga was about. And for me, that was the turning point. I said, that's yoga, and this man is going to be my teacher one day. It happened in 1997. It really happened like this. And then I started practicing yoga based on the principles I learned from The Heart of Yoga. And I simplified my practice and managed to develop consistency and discipline because I started enjoying my practice. And then in the year 2000, when I, for the first time, went on the internet, I just typed Mark Whitwell into the Yahoo, and there were only like 4 smaller references. And there was a blog by Mark, not really a website then, just a blog. And I found Mark's email there. And so I emailed Mark and asked if I can, write him a letter. And he said, okay. And so I wrote him a handwritten letter. And he responded with another letter. And this is how the conversation started. And from the year 2000 until this moment, we met, I think, 14 or 15 times, constantly communicating and exchanging experiences and, learning together. And it was quite an amazing experience and still is. Very grateful. Yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah, thank you. I remember it well. You know how I was doing this book called The Art of Yoga, and I was walking with Desikachar on the beach in Madras, and he suddenly said, Mark, I've got it. It's not the art of yoga, it's the heart of yoga. And then he went on to explain that the heart of yoga was, or the essence of yoga is this relationship, like actual relationship between actual people, you know, to establish that relationship is the whole matter that allows us to realize the state of yoga, the union, you know. And
absolutely.
Yeah, this thing is an intervention. And thank you for mentioning the heart of yoga. Like, I remember, you know, Desikachar was always saying that the student should not be expensive. This was strange language, but good language. The student should not be expensive to the teacher. You know, you shouldn't tax the teacher, you know. And you've always been like that, you know. You've always been very easy to live with, you know, and negotiate visits and so forth. You have this. I mean, you are in the heart of yoga, that you respect what this phenomena of the teacher is. You know, the teacher, no more than a friend, no less than a friend. The power of Mother Nature's nurturing and local community, you know, that's there to empower others. And I know that Desikachar's example with his own teacher was that. And, you know, thanks for mentioning the heart of yoga. You know, we published that book with Desikachar on the cover on the top and Krishnamacharya, his guru, on the bottom. And when he saw that, he freaked out. He was like, that's not right. The teacher's on the top. And then, you know, as the book was published in 95, and then as time went on, he was sort of upset because the book seemed to be all about him, Desikachar, and not about his teacher. And he was, it's not right. It shouldn't be. It should be about my father, my teacher. So, you know, we chose some poetry, this beautiful text of Krishnamacharya's own composition, and we wanted to put that in the book. So something had to go. So I didn't mind going, but so Krishnamacharya became a much more visible influence in the book.
In his own words.
Yeah, in his own words. So that was the reason for that introduction disappearing. It was a good reason. And anyway, in summary, you have always been inexpensive to me. And you sort of got on to what the nature of this whole thing is. And of course, it's not I say the teacher is no more than a friend, no less than a friend. It's not some sort of conventional seniority or hierarchical authority where you have to try to please me or something, which is the usual arrangement. I mean, it is an actual friendship. And perhaps we can say in actual friendship, people are kind to each other in actual friendship. They try to make sure that things are taken care of in the relationship. So you are in the heart of yoga, and that early statement to me where you said, there's one more heart of yoga teacher, because we were just setting off in those days. You know, we didn't have a lot of teaching going on. So now we do have, you know, quite a lot of people around the world responding specifically to these practices and understandings from Krishnamacharya and Desikachar and their friends, J and J Krishnamurti. And it's good. We're on a roll. And even in the midst of this dreadful pandemic, we're on a roll, you know, and we're communicating like this. And so let me thank you, Domagoj, for making this stand and being such a fine yoga teacher in the world. And like to this day, all the time, people turn up to me on these Zoom meetings, but previously when we were teaching in Bali or Europe or wherever, and they'd turn up and say, I'm a student of Domagoj.
Oh,
Asia. Yeah. And the fact that they had already been with you, there was an immediate heart recognition, you know, a gladness in the heart, you know, a bright outshining of limit of this world.
And obviously no sense of conflict, no sense of, hey, but he said this and you said that.
Right. Every now and again I'd say, oh, don't listen to Domagoj, listen to me. No. So you know, when I met you, things were pretty difficult. Things were grey and gloomy in this country of yours, and the relationship and everything that went down in Serbia, between Croatia and Serbia. And it was very sobering to hear from you firsthand, you know, events that had gone down. It was a deep shock to me. You know, it was like the stories that I got was, you know, it was like no different from what happened in Nazi Germany. But it was sort of like 5 years ago or something, you know, when I met you, that these atrocities had occurred. And I know that you suffered that in your family, you know, and your parents, and that you were perhaps having quite a difficult life, trying to make a living as a school teacher and all of that. Can you describe those early days and speak of this intervention of yoga into your life?
yes. I always say that the relationship between teacher and student is the primary yoga. And that's what I learned from you. And I'm very grateful for that. And you also taught me how to communicate well, both with you and people that I started to teach. So this quality of friendship and equality is the key. And from the very beginning, I felt that in our relationship. You know, it was always on the solid basis of equality. It was never a relationship of hierarchy. And this was really healing to me. And you remember how much I was in need to receive something, you know, straight from heart to heart. And I really got that from you. And this really helped me heal. I wasn't directly involved with the Croatian War. Actually, I refused to fight, but my father did fight. And it was 5 or 6 very difficult years, you know. The whole country was suffering enormously. And, you know, I was suffering too. Although I was not directly involved, I didn't kill people, you know. And after that, I experienced a big disappointment in a relationship that I was in. And so in the year 2000, when I first spoke to you, I was in a very bad shape. And I was psychologically distraught, so to speak, and I sort of lost direction. And so starting doing yoga with you was really a transforming experience for me. From the very beginning, I felt that I was, you know, accepted by you as I was. And the first time we met in 2004 in Munich, when we met face to face, I also viscerally felt that, organically, that, there is really a true friendship. And so it was only natural that most of the teachings that happened between you and me happened in an informal setting, just hanging out, talking about life and enjoying life and, laughing at ourselves, at our seriousness. And I was very serious, and you constantly was teaching me not to be that serious. And I also thank you for that, because I stopped being too serious.
Right.
And I don't take anything too seriously anymore. I'm much more relaxed. And I also don't demand this kind of seriousness from my students. So just an easygoing relationship, no strings attached, just two people, learning from each other, no hierarchy, no spiritual mumbo jumbo, just, practical means, and, to enjoy our lives to our fullest potential. That's all. And that's why I call what I teach yoga of heart, as is the title of your first book, because I want to emphasize this relationship. So I say I teach the heart of yoga with yoga of heart.
Yeah.
Because that's what's important. The essence, the heart of yoga gets transmitted only if there is yoga of heart happening between teacher and student, who are only friends.
Only, I like that. Thank you. Well,
That's it. In a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah, and please develop that nutshell a little bit if you wish. But I want to point out that the social conditions that you were born into and that you grew up in your childhood and adolescence, and what your father and mother suffered in the war, and not just the war, suffered the restrictions of life in Europe. I mean, Europe has its dark history, and they were in that history, And so in a certain way, you had every right to be desperate and stern and serious. Life was serious. And this intervention of yoga in your life, in my observation, has lifted off those karmas in Europe. Certainly for you and for your students and for society, in the big picture. There's a little circles of influence, ripples in the lake going out and out and out into Europe and the world, because Domagoj Orlić has somehow, with a lot of, I don't know, like you might say grace, this intervention of the great wisdom traditions that have come through Krishnamacharya. That's a big subject, this matter of, the nurturing flow of grace from an ancient world into the modern world, reached Europe, it reached you. And what I've observed about you is that you have genuinely dropped those karmas, those patterned roles, those patterned emotions and assumptions of the dark Europe. I mean, let's face it, Europe went through two dreadful wars, 1 and 2. And during that dreadful dark time in Europe, there were the sublimity of yogic realization in India in many examples of, Neem Karoli Baba, Ramana Maharishi, Anandamai Ma, Bhagwan Nityananda, Shirdi Sai Baba. it goes on and on and on, and known and unknown reality realizes, and Europe was going through what it was going through at the same time. And somehow we were graced to be able to go there in the late 60s and sit and receive. And I was one of the ones lucky enough for that to happen, for me to, meet some of these realizers and to study with really good people, Krishnamacharya and Desikacharya, who had actual knowledge of yoga, who weren't making business out of yoga. Their lives were actually sincere lives of realization, doing the best they could, in their traditions. So I've sort of grabbed a basket full of that and brought it to Europe, or did a bit of writing and so forth, put a book out, The Heart of Yoga, and you just like grabbed it. And I do see that there's been this genuine dropping of the patterned roles that you are otherwise fixated on in Croatia. And I'd just like to mention it, to complete my little dialogue here about you, is that at a certain point, you decided not to be a single man in your life, and you chose a beautiful woman to be intimate with in your life, Adisa. And I will speak to her sometime in this manner. And I just see that relationship is definitely a yoga union. The polar opposites as one. We can talk about that. It's just the tantra, has arisen. So I set the scene for you to say a little bit more about your life there and moving through into a life that is not just the fixation on the patterned role of the usual mind.
Yes. As you know, I was first a J Krishnamurti fan. I discovered J Krishnamurti when I was 17 or so, and started reading his books, and loved it. He seemed like a breath of fresh air, and I even became a vegetarian after reading one of his books when I was 17. And so there was a significant influence of J Krishnamurti on the way I was perceiving things when I was a teenager, when I was 17 or 18 years old, still in high school. And that's how I actually found out about the heart of yoga. I wanted to know what kind of yoga J Krishnamurti did. And then I found out that he was Desikacharya's student.
Yep.
And that's how I, came to the heart of yoga.
Yeah.
So J Krishnamurti had a very important influence in my life, because he helped me understand that freedom is actually very simple. Freedom is just being free from social conditioning. And I realized that I was heavily conditioned by the society in which I lived. And I also somehow sensed intuitively that yoga could help me get rid of all that. So yoga for me, especially after I met you, was deprogramming, definitely. Delete all bad software.
Nitty.
We were calling
netty, right. Not this, not that. And I really, it was a cleaning process. And it was a process. And at some point, I can't say when, but at some point, I began to feel free at last. And I think it happened sometimes in 2005 or 6, when actually the yoga that I learned from you kicked in. You know, it took 5 or 6 years for the yoga that I learned from you to kick in, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of suddenly felt free, you know, and I sort of experienced some quality of freedom that I knew existed but couldn't feel for some reason, because I was heavily conditioned by the society in which I lived. And from then on, I was able to teach, and I was able to understand better what's happening in my society and society at large. And yoga gave me that gift, this gift of understanding of what's really going on with me as a social being and with humanity as, you know, social animals. And I realized that isolation is not the solution. You know, I could have gone to a monastery or leave the world and, you know, concentrate on my spiritual life and drop everything, be a dropout or whatever. But I decidedly gave up on that idea. And in time, I engaged in a deep love relationship with the woman I love. And this was the second transformation, okay? So being actually in a loving relationship with another human being was really transformational and healing, and still is. Because we have this dual quality, being an individual and being a social animal. And we need to, you know, to cultivate both. And we should be doing this in a balanced way. So being alone and being with somebody, both. And also being a part of a collective, but not following blindly what the collective wants you to do. So, and yet, to paraphrase J Krishnamurti, not to be in conflict first with yourself and then not to be in conflict with society, which is often quite difficult, especially when you have to earn a living. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I was teaching at a school for almost 13 years and got fired because I refused to do some administrative work there. And from the year 2010, I've been a professional yoga teacher. So it was also a breaking point for me when I actually decided to teach yoga and for living. And this was really a good decision for me, because I could concentrate more on yoga, on my writing, on teaching more, teaching full time, and sort of committing to this, you know, goal of giving people practical means to know themselves and make a difference in the world.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning this process of realizing that dissociation from tangible conditions was not a success in terms of, you know, religious, spiritual, yogic life, and that you intended, therefore, to enter into relationship of every kind, including with this yogini Edissa. In fact, I think you taught her. She became a yogini in your company because you're able to give her the tools of the Tantra and so forth. And I just want to revisit this soon in our conversation, but you embody this wisdom tradition from Krishnamacharya, from his 10th century Guru Parampara Ramanuja Acharya, that the Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta and Tantra is one Dharma, is one way. You know, Advait implies not two, one. Advait, right? There is one. And Ramanuja said it is yoga that joins the two to be the one for the mind. You know, certainly there is the one, there is, or if we want to use that religious language, there is only God. However, the mind is a tricky monkey, and the mind is assuming separation. So yoga is joining the two to be what they are, not separate, not different. You know, difference dissolved in the one reality in which everything is happening. And you have embodied that. You've done it, and I thank you for being an example of that. You know, and this sort of pronouncement by Ramanuja saying, you know, there must be yoga, and that implies the union of opposites, including male-female opposites, whether it's same-sex or opposite-sex intimacy or any gender identification or none at all. Life is the union of opposites. At every level, life is that union of opposites. So I think the tendency towards renunciation was in you, you know, being in Europe, you know, your parents being of the church and so forth. You know, that's a very valid option for a good man like you to want to do good for your community. So you go off and you leave woman, you know, you literally leave your mother and go to the monastery and become a sincere, you know, serious attention on God, away from the objects, away from the feminine, which has been a vast social influence in Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years, as it has been in Asia as well. And yet there's this thin line of, you know, in our vast world of humanity, there's this thin line of wisdom teaching that has come right into the modern time, is that Vedanta and Tantra are one Dharma, you know, and it's not understood. Either Tantra is, you know, crazy, exaggerated nonsense, you know, the neo-Tantra thing, or there's this excess of renunciation, dropping away, you know.
Or else the other phenomena, which is a kind of sentimental desire for only ancient things, ancient texts, or ancient things coming from research or academic learning, and almost a distaste for that in real life in modern times. You know, it's one of the things I wanted to ask you, Domagoj, is you seem to have the ability to blend ancient and modern, and to, you know, recognize ancient traditions or techniques from your learning and your scholarship, how they come through in modern form, and not to have a demand that things be stuck in an ancient paradigm only, or an academic stuck in time paradigm, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I agree totally, because there is so much value in the old stuff, in the things that we got from tradition. But also we must recognize the plain fact that we are modern people, and we are quite different from the ancient people who invented all that. And so the question, what is traditional yoga or traditional tantra or traditional this or that, is quite quite a complex one, and there is no straightforward answer to this, because it's always a blend of old and new. And it has to be like that. It's the necessity of life. And we need to adapt constantly all the time. And I realized that very early on, and I wasn't obsessed with the old. We need to live here and now, and we need to think about the future of those who come after us. So what we have inherited from our ancestors, we must respect, but we also have the freedom to, to change it to suit our needs. And this is not sacrilege or whatever, or not being true to our tradition. It's just the flow of life. It's how humanity learns. We receive something from tradition, and then we add our own experience of being here, living here and now, and that's how humanity moves on, goes on, survives, and develops. And it's very important to realize that. And of course, there are extremes. There are always all kinds of extremes, and that's what yoga is supposed to teach us, to find balance in whatever we do. And yoga really helped me to find my own balance in whatever I do. Having a background in philosophy, because I studied philosophy, both Western and Eastern philosophy, I realized how important it is to understand things and to keep on investigating, not to be stuck with one truth or one system or one this or that, but to constantly investigate, and how the concept of some kind of final enlightenment is false through and through. And I literally felt that organically in my body, that there is nothing static in me. It's a constant change, and the direction of that change depends on the quality of my perception. So I started working on the quality of my perception through my yoga practice, so that I can see more, see deeper, see better, and make my own decisions that I can, vouch for. And that's what I'm teaching people, always reminding them that there is no absolute truth. Maybe even this truth that all is one is just a practical tool for us to learn how to concentrate on what really matters, not as an absolute truth, because what we see is multiplicity. We see, we see how complex the cosmos is in its fullness. And in the meditative experience, we go back to the source and then realize that all this has just one source, and that there is no difference between this one source and the world of the seen phenomena. But it's not like these are not religious statements pronouncing absolute truth about the universe. It's our experience, and we are constantly exploring, and there is never end to our explorations. Even the Greek philosopher Heraclitus said that no matter how much we investigate ourselves, there is no end to self-knowledge. So that's how I see yoga. That's how I see life. Just an opportunity for constant development. No final end. Just living your life in the direction you feel in your heart is right for you. That's all.
My guru, William Blake, he would back you up. Absolutely. He wrote in that famous letter, "The tree that moves one to tears of joy is to another just a green thing that stands in the way." as a person is, so they see. He made it very obvious, you know, that the matter of perception was not just a philosophical navel-gazing, but had very obvious practical outcomes in terms of how we act in the world. So what you said about that process of cleansing the doors of perception, as he put it, is it's obviously not a process that's apart from living.
Yeah, but it can be a definition of yoga, right? To cleanse the doors of perception.
Totally, I would call him a yogi.
He was a yogi in the 18th century, right?
Right.
In Western. Like Meister Eckhart, for example, the Christian mystic, you know, who said, I pray to God to liberate me from God, you know, from my conception of God, you know. And he really said that, you know, and he was excommunicated from the church, you know, for saying stuff like that, you know. Our idea of God is actually preventing us to know God, you know, and it was totally against the Christian dogma at the time, you know.
You know,
and
the language that we've used there, Domagoj, is that looking for God implies that God is absent, and that's the problem. This is a great line from J Krishnamurti. The looking is the problem, right? So stop looking, start living. And I think that
instead of recognizing that we are living gods in this very body here that is mortal, but in this mortality there is immortality.
Yeah, but what could create a what could create a hand? What could create my eyesight and see you? What could do that? What is doing that? And I just
such an incredible.
And I'd like to just say this the obviousness of one reality of the cosmic domain arising as the whole body. We are obviously a duplication of the grand patterning of the cosmic domain, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
And
how this could not be God, you know, or different from God.
This intelligence, this beauty, this intrinsic harmony of this body with the cosmos in which it appears, you know, and harmonies of every tangible kind, air and light and water and green, you know, male, female collaboration is the nurturing power of life itself, you know, or motherhood, fatherhood, and our own intimacy with another and so forth that produces new life. I mean, this is happening, and I just, this obviousness of one reality arising as everything is never a dissociation from anything. You know, the utter uniqueness of every person appearing is obvious. You know, the uniqueness of form, of individuation is not dissociated from. It is felt and acknowledged in the one. So you've demonstrated that in your life, and you've progressed from a dreadful patriarchal society of Europe and its warfares and its, you know, deep illness, deep insanity in the human species in European form. You were born into that, and you've come through into your body throwing out these patterned roles that you were born into. And it's exceptional, and I pray that you will become very well known and that you'll be able to explain this to people, you know. And this, I'd like to revisit in a short time in our conversation this this matter of Vedanta and Tantra are one Dharma, because I know that you had some experience there. But first of all, I'd like to ask you, you said just then that it took 5 years for this yoga to kick in. 5 years? What? What was I doing for 5 years? I must have been a useless teacher that it took 5 years for you to get a result from what I was teaching you. My God.
Actually, I mention this story quite often because people have a modern impatience, a desire for instant results. And, you know, our bodies have become so hardened and so numb that often they don't feel much straight away. For some people, but for others not. Certainly for me, I had no idea what bandha were meant to feel like for several years. And suddenly, just feeling a subtle energy feeling. We were driving along and I said to Mark, is that the feeling that you meant? And he said, duh.
So you did feel something early on, you know, and through 5 years, but you said after 5 years, something happened. Can you describe this, you know, for people listening too, who, you know, describe that process of the embodiment becoming a yogi?
And do you think your time practicing gymnastics slowed that down because of the patterns of gymnastics? Or do you think it actually helped you, that you'd already achieved what you wanted to achieve in the body and so you didn't need to keep pursuing that forever?
Yes, the gymnastic conditioning was something that prevented me to actually start practicing yoga. Mm-hmm. And when I started practicing with Mark, it started to change slowly. And it definitely happened when I started breathing with J in asana well. I did breathe with J while doing asana from the very beginning, but it was not consistent, and it was not I don't know, it was not good enough. So when Mark and me practiced privately in Zagreb in 2005, I got it for the first time. You know, I really felt that I was breathing with my whole body. Mm-hmm. And until then, Ujjayi was there, but sometimes it was not there. And it was not consistent. Once it became consistent, and when I really felt that my whole body is breathing and that the breath is longer than the movement, and when that started happening all the time in my practice, things changed for the better. Yeah. And it was just one private session with Mark that opened up all that. And it was in the year 2005. And then we met in the same year in Zurich. And at that occasion in 2005, Mark told me, sorry, this is not yoga, this is still gymnastics. You know, you said that to me in 2005. And it was, you know, it was a strange thing to hear, because at that time I thought I was doing real yoga. And then I realized immediately I wasn't. And then we met for the second time in the same year in Zurich, and you said, now it's much better, without me asking anything. And so I sort of knew I was on the right track. And from then on, my yoga really became soft. It was really soft. And I was totally released from my fixation on the form. So form became totally irrelevant. Only the quality of feeling while doing asana was important. And of course, then my pranayama improved and meditation improved, you know, naturally. So all three basic components, asana, pranayama, dhyana, or meditation, then really became a one functional whole for me. And then I was actually able to teach that to others. So it was a process. One of the reasons, of course, it was a longer process for me because of my gymnastic conditioning and because I did not have access to Mark, you know, on a daily basis. So this probably slowed it down. but it's a process for everybody, a bit different for everybody, but it's always a process. And once things start happening like this, you feeling that the breath is the moving power behind the movement, and when that naturally becomes a static pranayama, and then pranayama clears the mind naturally, and then you start perceiving things from a clear mind, then you also realize how yoga and life are just one circle of mutual support. Yoga supporting life, life supporting yoga. One functional whole.
Asana, pranayama, meditation, and life as a seamless process.
Yeah.
Speaking of, hey, we should have had a few Zoom calls a little earlier on. And I mean, you speak for the need of the intervention of an actual teacher Descachat used to say this, you can learn it from a book, you can learn it from a video or whatever, but there's no substitute for a person who cares about you, observing your practice and making some nuance or some subtle suggestion, some refinement here and there.
When you first met Descachat, had you sort of cobbled together a yoga practice from a lot of stuff you'd learned?
Oh, the same happened to me, Domagoj, but I'd been in India for almost a year, I think, before I met Descachat, and I'd been doing this yoga, that yoga, all around the place. And I went to him and he said, "Show me your practice." And immediately he took away things. Krishnamurti apparently did that a lot. He spent a lot of his yoga teaching knee yoga, not yoga. Take that away,
Including with J Krishnamurti, right?
Yeah.
I loved reading about how Descachat first came to teach J Krishnamurti, and he was struggling with all these inversions and veins popping on his forehead, and he was already not a young man. And he said, "I want you to stop doing all of that." And he knew he was a great man because he said, "Sure." And he was so impressed that he said he knew what it meant to be a student in that moment.
And thank you.
And this story about how J Krishnamurti learned yoga from Descachat is a living proof how yoga is an extremely subtle thing. Because such a sensitive person like J Krishnamurti definitely was, he also needed so much time, to discover the right yoga for him. Of course, he was taught by Iyengar before, and he had to, to move from that. And he felt that something was wrong, and that's why he asked Krishnamacharya to help. But even very sensitive people can easily get it wrong, even when they have a good teacher. So things are very subtle, very delicate, and people need to be very careful because it's so easy to get it all wrong. When I say wrong, I don't mean to undervalue what people are doing. I'm just saying that no matter what you, let me put it this way, there is always some space for us to improve our practice. So in 2003, I thought that was yoga. In 2005, I realized there's more. In 2010, I sort of realized now what I'm doing is really beneficial for me. Yes, I can teach it, but still there is so much for me to learn. Okay. And now after 20 years with Mark, I'm still learning, and I'm still discovering new things on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And this is the beauty of yoga.
You know, having met J Krishnamurti and been in his places of residence in more recent times, going to Ojai, where he lived for 30 years, and hearing his struggle with his realization and his struggle with the people who would come to him. And it's a very interesting subject because, of course, in the traditions, what Krishnamacharya was holding, he was saying to respond to the reality realizer, who we presume J Krishnamurti was. You know, he was in some sort of state of freedom. But in that tradition, yoga is what you do, what an ordinary person does to respond to that communication from the realizer. And Jiddu never put that two and two together. That he never really, he loved it and he did it as a daily discipline for years and years in his late life. But he never got this understanding of the wisdom tradition is what someone can do that is practical, that aligns their body-mind to the realization that is being offered in the relationship with the realizer. Are you with me on that? You track what I'm saying?
Yes, it's because he refused to offer a method, you know, to self-realization. He was against all methods, including yoga. But he himself practiced it, and he was teaching yoga to some of his students, you know. But he never clearly said, you know, it was always like we are doing it for better health. It was, you know, never, you know, doing it as a response to the grace of our teacher.
Of course, yoga practice is not a method to a future result. It is only participation in the given reality that he was teaching and giving by his presence, right? But for an ordinary mind who, you know, is not spontaneously, you know, in the state of yoga as a jiva mukti, causelessly, you know, falling into that state that apparently happened to him and happened to J Krishnamurti. For a regular person, this yoga is your participation in the given reality that in time, either gradually or suddenly, puts the body-mind into the state of reality, right? But it's not a method, it is participation only. I think you get that, yeah.
Do you think because yoga is so popularized as a method that just entrenches that idea of not being good enough yet, or not being there yet? You do this, and you get to this.
Yeah.
Do you think his mission of denying seeking trumped any kind of mission to share a yoga that wasn't that? Because if he had endorsed yoga, it would have been endorsing all of the plethora of options that were selling a method, and maybe that would have been a greater disservice to society.
Well, both UG and JK spend a lot of time dissing yoga, you know, the conventional search of their own society. UG, the nostril-holding arrogance of the yogi, you know, and the bhav that the yogi develops. So you do a little yoga and you start feeling really good about yourself, you know, and all that arrogance and stupidity. So they spent most of their time in discussions of yoga just like throwing it out. But in reality, both were in the state of yoga. Both were realized. See, reality realizes of the one life that lives all, and its pure intelligence and its beauty and its intrinsic harmonies. You know, they lived in that, but they never like
they both.
Yeah.
And they both practiced, and they both practiced yoga, and they were both teaching yoga.
Exactly. So I think, you know, in your life, and we clarify this a little bit. Well, I hope we clarify it a lot. I actually feel that what J Krishnamurti brought in his relationship to Krishnamacharya was a deep clarification of yoga for humanity for the rest of time. He held Krishnamacharya to the fire of his own teaching, and that is that yoga must be adapted to the individual needs of each person, so that it is their yoga, that it's right for them. It's not a cleaving to some sort of future success program. It's not trying to get enlightened. It's not trying to do some sort of exaggeration on your body mind in any way at all. And Yuji just came along and just nailed that in place. And that's what I feel that, I know that you had a love for both Krishnamurtis, Domagoj, and I feel that you've come under their intervention in this world, their life, their grace, and what they brought to yoga. But I just feel we need a little bit of clarification that we just had around that matter. In Krishnamacharya's words, yoga is what you do in response to the Guru's grace, including response, who's your Guru? Maybe Jesus Christ is your Guru, in response to the grace of Christ coming through that siddhi, that influence. And thanks for letting me go here, because I know your mother is a very sincere Roman Catholic in her lifetime church of great faith. And you have taught her yoga, and now she practices yoga as a part of her response to the Guru's grace. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How's your mother doing? You've got a wonderful story of a Croatian woman practicing yoga as part of her Christian liturgy. Please tell us a little bit about that.
It's actually quite simple. She was looking at me doing yoga and she simply got interested. I never imposed it on her. And when she got interested, I taught her a simple practice and explained to her that it is not in conflict with her religion. Yeah. She accepted it and started practicing, and she practiced it for, 6 or 7 years, very, very consistently. And then she got ill and stopped practicing for a while and then started again. And so she did have some pauses, significant pauses, but she is a yoga practitioner, definitely. And she doesn't feel that there is any conflict between her practice of yoga and her Christian religion. And she is a living proof that a Christian can practice yoga successfully without being in conflict.
Does she weave them together at all?
Yes, sometimes she does some praying, Christian praying while doing yoga, or does some Christian affirmations like Jesus is with me or Jesus loves me or stuff like that. But she generally does asana and pranayama and just sits quietly for a while and then does whatever she feels is right. Sometimes she prays, sometimes she reads religious books, or sometimes she just repeats some affirmations like this: Jesus is with me, Jesus is with me, Jesus is with me, or something like that. She sort of developed her own synthesis of yoga and Christian faith. Beautiful. Which is fine.
You published some lovely photographs of your mother in asana, and I'm recalling those. I want to have a look at those again soon.
And in terms of your own synthesis, would you say a little about Sri Vidya?
Oh, it's a big subject. In 2006, I discovered Sri Vidya Shakta Tantra. I knew about it before, of course, but actually Mark Mark sort of prompted me into going deeper into that, because I noticed that the Bija mantras that Mark was using and still using have their origin in Sri Vidya. Okay, so I saw some of them, and so I tried to find the exact origin, and that's how I stumbled on some Sri Vidya teachings, and slowly started practicing Sri Vidya myself, and sort of connected the two, yoga with Sri Vidya. But it's a very complex philosophy and religion, but it is always adapted to each individual, and it's done differently. Everybody is doing it differently according to the person's needs, background, purpose, or whatever. So I'm doing Sri Vidya in a very similar way in which I do my yoga. You know, it's like enjoying my life to the fullest potential. That's all. And Sri Vidya helps me a little bit in that. But also, you know, walking in nature or hanging with friends, or I don't know, doing whatever one likes to do, does the same. Okay, there is no any special value to it. You know, it's just one way to enjoy life.
I love the way, Domagoj, every now and again you slip in beautiful photographs of Madonna, you know, Mother Mary, and you know you'll be speaking of the Sri Vidya, you know, the South Indian tantras and its methodology and mantra and so forth, and suddenly in your presentation there is a beautiful Mary from a local church, in, you know, down the street from you, and we're all going flowers at the feet and so forth. So what's different, you know? Just to make this point, this basic tantra is devotion to, even worship of the feminine, the power of this cosmos that brings everything forth, that is everything. This tantra, the starting point is that God has brought this body into existence and is presently residing as this body, you know, of course. And then all the potential for individuation and relatedness to every aspect of the cosmos, including, you know, the actual feminine. And, you know, so that you did that at a certain point in your life. You brought this in for...
Yes. There is a beautiful little underground shrine, maybe 500 meters away from where I live, where there is a beautiful statue this big of Holy Mary. Yeah. My mother and I visit that little shrine very often and leave a flower, leave an apple, or, you know, we are worshippers of Holy Mary. And there is a spring of water coming down, you know, and people used to come to get water there in the past, not now anymore, but, you know, it's actually a water spring. Yeah. So above the water spring, there is the statue of Mary, and so she is literally giving life by giving water, you know. And so by worshipping Mary, you are also worshipping the natural elements. You are worshipping water. You are worshipping life. You are worshipping the continuation of life, and it can all be felt in this little underground shrine that we visit almost every day. You know, it's like a little pilgrimage each day to her, and she's everything.
It's so beautiful for me to observe you bringing that to your mother, and, you know, your devotion to your mother. in every way, and devotion to Mother Nature, you know, where every face and form is sacred, you know.
Yeah.
Every place is sacred in this, the indigenous realization of humanity, the wisdom
And
realization.
especially, yes, and especially the living person is sacred, you know, the actual person.
Totally. Well, this is what I was saying before about Vedanta and Tantra are one Dharma. And it certainly, that's what happened in the, you know, at least we know historically in the 10th century this happened, that the Tantras deeply influenced Vedanta culture, or a lineage within Vedanta that is still quite small today compared to the vast culture of Vedanta and Hinduism. But you have you've taken that on through studying the, you know, South Indian tantras and brought it into, you know, your teachers' practices, and seen the cohesion and the necessary relationship of both, as Ramanuja had pronounced. And, you know, the Krishnamacharya gave us 101 years of a useful life to bringing that into the human public mind, you know. So thank you so much for doing this work for Croatia. And I'm also very happy that you're getting known in other European countries. And I want to remind you that before we met, you hadn't left Croatia. And I was the bait on the hook. That, you know, I was in Munich, I think, and you were in Croatia, and you made that long 30-hour train ride, and you left your country for the very first time, you know. And
I didn't have to go to India to get yoga, you know. Yoga came to me to Europe, and so I never had to go to India.
That's right. You didn't have to inconvenience yourself. And I remember over the years, your trips got longer and longer. And then the longest one I got you to take was Croatia to London, which was a long, long journey by train. And
a 25-hour drive by train.
So thank you for leaving your beloved country to see me. I'm very touched that you did that. And then the big one.
It was always a pleasure.
The big one came when we were teaching in Crete, remember? And the only way that you could get conveniently to Crete was to hop on a plane. And you had not flown. How old were you when you took your first flight?
I was 46.
Right. And you were shaking in your boots. And that was a whole yogic lesson in itself, you know, facing the unknown. And you did that for me, and you did it for humanity to, you know, to be together in this learning together, this sharing. And so, you know, thank you so much for stepping out of your comfort zone to enjoy this meeting, these meetings, this relationship.
Yes, of course. You know, I always knew that it was, you know, the student's duty, or the student's duty to make an effort to find a teacher, you know, and to invest time, money, energy, whatever is necessary, you know, to get into a teaching relationship. And it was totally understandable for me, you know. And so it was never difficult. It was always a small pilgrimage, you know. It was a meeting of two friends. So it was always sheer pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. And and each occasion was really it was always a joyful occasion, and thank you for that. I always learned so much and had fun and met other people and brought some people with me, and there were all kinds of combinations, and meeting Rosalind, and you know, it was just beautiful. Otherwise, I would have stayed in Croatia. Wouldn't have gone anywhere. I would be an urban hermit, you know.
Or as a serious man, you might have been in the monastery.
Yeah, maybe in some monastery, you know.
We save you
and
from that fate.
yeah, being isolated somewhere, you know, and being afraid of living a real life in real world.
Yeah. Well, I remember you've gone to, as far away. You've been to Ireland, you've been to the UK, to England, to Ireland. That's what I remember. And you've been quite a few other places teaching yoga around Europe. And thank you so much, because if you didn't do it, they wouldn't be getting it, you know. And especially I meet the people from Pila and Zagreb, and Italy, who have come under your spell, your influence. Slovenia, yep. And so really, thank you so much, Domagoj, for all you're doing for this world, and all that you are as a yogi who's freed yourself from the patterning, the gross patterning of the usual life that we're handed, you know, that makes everybody suffer. In the checkerboard of separate object and the separate knower of the imagined separate object, and all the mess of mind that the world is in right now. And you cut through. And you even got on an aeroplane with great fear. You felt the fear and you did it anyway. And you're on the plane, you're saying, hey, this is not so bad. In fact, this is good.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, let me finish with one interesting thing. Many years ago, you told me being a yoga teacher is the highest occupation in the world. And I was still a school teacher, and I was sort of happy with my job, and I sort of did not want to teach yoga professionally. And you were sort of nudging me to do it. And I was sort of, no, I want to teach yoga as a hobby, and I have a real job. And, you know, we had conversations like that. And then you told me being a yoga teacher, you said it seriously, being a yoga teacher is the highest occupation in the world. And it sounded like true, but a bit of an exaggeration. I felt it was exaggerated a bit. But now, especially knowing and feeling what's happening in the world, the chaos we are right now, and after teaching yoga for the last 10 years professionally and doing mostly that, I am totally convinced that being a yoga teacher is the highest occupation. Actually, being a teacher, and especially yoga teacher, you know. And now I have no doubts that this is so.
Yeah, I would say the highest and the hardest job. Yeah. Because, man, you're taking on the karmas of the world. You know, you're into
high risk.
Yeah, you take on, no more than a friend, no less than a friend, and you're an intervention of that patterning, and especially the presumptions that the teacher is this sort of higher person, and is often a sort of a replacement for, motherhood, fatherhood, and that, all the childhood and adolescent responses come up sometimes, and that you are offering a context for those to be, for the person, your student, to be relieved of that patterning. So that's why I say it's a hard job. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And you do it, and you persist with people and you stay kind to people. And you know, you are a yoga teacher, capital Y, capital T. And you're also,
thanks to you.
yeah, well, no, thanks to Krishnamacharya. Thanks to the wisdom traditions that flourished between the 5th and the 14th century, then disappeared, you know, and patriarchy took over in Asia and Europe and made a mess of this yoga thing and turned it into, you know, male dominance, and all of that is dread. And you know, the modern day yoga scene is a continuation of this. You know, the knower, the authority, the dominant personality, men and women unwittingly passing on that you know, dominant patterning, trying to get somewhere as if you're not somewhere, as if you're not the power of the cosmos already. You know, yoga being participation only in the given reality. And, you know, Krishnamacharya nailed that, and he defined it really carefully, these principles. And I see you passing them on into your community. And I see you creating teachers, because I've met many of them. You've created, you know, a network of teachers. And it's such a good thing. You might have made teachers who are better teachers than you are, which is the goal. Remember Krishnamacharya? The goal of the teacher is to make your student a better teacher than you are. So I know you've taken that on sincerely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Yep. On that note, with great gratitude, Domagoj, thank you for sharing these, 15 years together?
20.
20, is it? Wow, my God. Time flies when you're having fun.
Of course.
And we meet again soon. If we don't meet in Europe, we'll meet on Zoom soon.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for this conversation. Thank you, Rosalind, for participating here too in this conversation. Rosalind was going to introduce us, then run away. She came back.
You were both too interesting, and you know I can never resist sticking my oar in.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rosalind. It's been a pleasure, you know, talking to you and knowing you.
Domagoj, the morning sun is shining through the Croatian window.
Finally.
They're flashing on your hands, and you're transmitting light.
Yeah.
You put your hands down by, there, at your, yep. Wow. Down a bit, down a bit,
Yeah.
down a bit. Yes, leave them there. Well, wait on. I'm having a holy moment here. You've just been to see the Mother Mary, and you're at the well, and you're transmitting light to everybody viewing this. And just let's have it for another moment.
Yes, and here is the Sarvayoni Mudra of Sri Vidya, you know, symbolizing the source from which everything came into existence and to which everything returns.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Love from me.
Yeah, love. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.